So I want to introduce Tavis Lynch. He is a mushroom expert, not only in Wisconsin, but way beyond Wisconsin. He's written a few books, and I grew up with his family. I have purchased a few of his mushroom blocks over the past few years and grown my own mushrooms, and so appreciate his knowledge and inspiration and motivation to do something this cool. So Tavis Lynch, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to surprise you with what we're going to do today. We're going to do it two parts. Hopefully I can get to both of them. I am going to shut my video off. You don't need to see me anyway, because I've got a little bit of internet issues here. So I want to keep it as clean as possible. So today we're going to start with the mushrooms of the forest collision. So this really relates to Northwest Wisconsin. I thought this was a Rice Lake Club. I'm hearing now a lot of Minnesota talk. So it's going to be close, we'll say, but that's okay. We're not too far away. So mushrooms of the forest collision. Mushrooms grow in 5 different types of ways. We have our parasites, which are basically like our ticks and leeches. So we have parasitic mushrooms. They're all over the place. We see them typically growing on trees or other mushrooms. We have pathogenic mushrooms. Pathogenic mushrooms are similar to parasitic mushrooms, but they actually destroy every cell that they touch, killing it. Then we have our saprobes or our saprophytes or our saprotrophs, however you'd like to say it. These are mushrooms that are decomposing material that's already dead. Compost, leaf litter, manure, dead wood, dead animals, other dead mushrooms. Then we have the enslavement mushrooms that are actually offering structure for lichens by capturing 2 other species of fungus and a species of bacteria and a species of algae. So there's like 5 species working together. But the question is, do those species really want to be there? They're kind of captured by the Ascomycota fungus that makes the structure for the lichens. And then we have our mycorrhizal mushrooms. That's a very broad group of mushrooms that is in a mutually beneficial relationship with a vascular plant, typically a tree. All trees have specific fungi that they bond with for different needs: water, nutrition, and respiration. In exchange, the tree gives back to the mushroom the oxygen that it breathes and its excess sugars. So when we're little kids, we're taught that tree roots soak up water. That's actually not true. It's just an easy way of teaching it. It's a little more complex than that. But every tree in the world is getting its water from some type of a fungus. There's a bond there. It's a handshake that looks like this. So the organism is the mycelium. That's our white fibers that we don't see. The mushroom is actually just the reproductive structure of a much larger organism. So that organism is alive and well underground, and it's bonded to, in this case here, a tree. 95% of all vascular plants are mycorrhizal, bonded with some type of fungus, all trees. So I had a guy in my class a couple of years ago. He just flat out said, I've never heard that. I don't believe you. So then he went home and Googled it, and he came back to class the next day and said he didn't sleep that night because he read about this for, what did he say, like 10 hours. There's tons of good information on it, because it comes as a shock to people that tree roots don't soak up water. No, they're pumped water by mushrooms. Tree diversity will equal fungal diversity because these trees with their mycorrhizal partners, their partners are very specific. This type of tree only grows with this type of mushroom and vice versa. So some trees need more than one species of fungi and then vice versa. Some fungi need more than one species of trees to survive. So the more diverse the forest is, the more opportunity you have for fungal diversity. So where is the highest tree diversity in the United States? Liberty County, Florida. Not anywhere near us. Liberty County has 138 species of trees just in that one little tiny county. All of Wisconsin together only has 74 tree species, native tree species, many of which are rare or very specific to small regions, like the chinkapin oak only grows in 4 counties in Wisconsin. The advantage that we have here in Wisconsin is not tree diversity, but forest diversity. So in Florida, it's one type of forest. In Wisconsin, we have 4 types of forests. We've got on the east side, the Carolinian broadleaf forest. This is the woods that contains the American beech tree, the Kentucky coffee tree, the common hop tree, the chinkapin oak, and the black gum. These are trees that we don't see where I'm at. I'm up in northwest Wisconsin. These trees just don't exist here. And that line is roughly this blue line. Everything to the right of that is in the Carolinian broadleaf forest. Now, I drew these lines. They're not perfect. I work in 71 of the 72 counties in Wisconsin, and I kind of drew these lines myself by what I've noticed for tree changes. Then we have the boreal forest. Now, it's not like a solid forest. It's little smatterings of boreal forest, true boreal forest in northern Wisconsin. Minnesota doesn't have that for whatever reason. Upper Michigan has a tiny little bit of it, but not very much. It's mostly limited to the counties across the northern border of Wisconsin: Douglas, Bayfield, Ashland, Iron, Vilas, Forest, and Florence counties. And that's where we're going to see trees like balsam fir, white spruce, eastern hemlock, even black spruce, white cedar, and large white birch. This is balsam fir. It grows a little bit where I'm at here in Cumberland, but if I go a little bit north, I will see a lot more of this tree. It's a very common tree. It's very long, spear shaped. It's very thin at the base. Very important tree. We also see some very large white birches north of here, and incredibly large yellow birches. This picture is on Madeline Island, which has a little tiny piece of boreal forest at the northeast end. And this is our border of the boreal forest. Oh, and Door County. I forget Door County has a little bit of boreal forest in it as well. So these are just little smatterings. This line isn't like a solid forest there. On the western half of the state, we have what's called the Minnesota bigwoods, or the Minnesota broadleaf forest. This is where we see a lot more white oak, pin oak, bitternut hickory, ironwood, and with ironwood, I'm referring to hop hornbeam, the scaly barked ironwood, not the smooth bark, and a lot of red maples. Pin oak is a very common tree in the western part of Wisconsin. It looks like a red maple, except, and I think my arrow will work here, the sinuses are very deep in the leaves. They're very deeply notched. It's commonly planted as an ornamental, but it is definitely a wild native tree here in the western part of the state. Minnesota bigwoods kind of reaches in like this. Then we have what's called the Laurentian forest. So the Laurentian forest varies a little bit. It's definitely northern, and sometimes called the northern conifer forest. But these are forests that actually drain to the Atlantic Ocean rather than draining to the Gulf of Mexico. These drain into the Great Lakes. So Minnesota, Wisconsin, all the Great Lakes states have a little bit of Laurentian forest. Our common trees there are yellow birch. The only oak that grows there is red oak, black spruce, kind of a scrubby little tree. They don't get very big. They grow in really dense clusters. Red pine and white pine. These are our dominant trees in the Laurentian forest. This is a yellow birch here, not a very large one, but you can see that the bark is much yellower than our common white birch. And this is the line for the Laurentian forest. So here, most of, and it's not obviously not all of it, because there are rivers that flow into the St. Croix and into the Mississippi that are within this, but a lot of this drains towards Lake Superior. And then we have what some books will call the tension line. I call it the collision. It's the same idea. And this is where our 3 forests come together in northwest Wisconsin. I excluded the Carolinian line over here because it's not really relevant to what we're talking about today. So the epicenter of mushroom diversity is about right here. Hayward, Wisconsin, Cable, Wisconsin, actually has the highest mushroom diversity of anywhere in the United States. I just happened to live here. I got lucky with where I was born. We didn't know how diverse it was until we did a fungal survey in 2017, where 380 of my closest mushroom friends came from around the world and did a survey of the Chequamegon National Forest near Cable, Wisconsin. And in 2 days, we came back with 502 species of mushroom in early September. shattering all old records of 300, 250, 320. We blew that away, 502 just in 2 days. And that's just a snapshot in time. That was September 15th and 16th or whatever it was. That doesn't count summer mushrooms. It doesn't count late fall mushrooms. It doesn't count spring mushrooms. And nothing was, I'm sure that we didn't get all of them, because I was there last September and 2 species came in that I'd never seen before. Now, my notes, I've been collecting wild mushrooms since about 1985, 86. I have photographed 755 species of mushroom in Wisconsin. And last year at Cable, 2 new ones came in, 2 brand new mushrooms to me. I'd never seen them before. I had to look one of them up. I had no idea what it was. I don't think I included photos of that today, but I could certainly show anyone that wants to see them afterwards. So when we don't have the tree diversity that Florida has. Is what we have forest type diversity. So is what we're seeing is trees that aren't supposed to grow next to each other, growing next to each other. So we get some very unique mushrooms. Definitely some rare ones. And we're gonna wrap this up, and then I'm gonna jump into the other program on what I do when I find these rare mushrooms. So Amanita schwamiganensis, named after the Schwamigan National Forest in northwest Wisconsin. This little guy has an extremely limited range. This was discovered by Dr. Britt Bonyard, a good friend of mine and one of my mentors. We had it genetically sequenced in 2013, maybe, and then many times afterwards. And its range is so limited that if you take North Delta Road to where it meets Jans Road near Drummond, Wisconsin, it grows on this side of the intersection, the southwest and the southeast, but it does not grow on the northeast or the northwest. It's limited to about 1/8 of a mile in and a half-mile long strip on both sides of the road. So about a 1/4 mile by a half mile. That's as far as that mushroom grows that we know of. And we've searched. Believe me, we've put a lot of time in trying to find this mushroom in other places. It grows exclusively with very old white pines, from what we can tell. There's a few other trees splashed in there, but not very many. It's pretty much found exclusively with very mature white pines, very large trees. Why is that? Well, a mushroom can reproduce in a lot of different ways, and one of them is actually by changing its own genetic code. So it can actually change its species over time to adapt to certain conditions. So what conditions are different there than a mile away? We don't know. It's one of the great mysteries, and one of the things that we are trying to figure out. So I've spent a lot of time at North Delta Road between Drummond and the town of Delta. It's been fun. We haven't made much for progress. We don't understand why they're exclusive there. If you're heading towards Hayward, Wisconsin, on Highway 63, there's a wayside near the town of Spring Brook. There is another mushroom in the genus Amanita that grows there that we don't think grows anywhere else in the world. Right now, its name is Amanita species WI02, and we know very little about it. It was discovered in 2013 as well, and has been spotted there 8 times over the last 10 years. Does it grow anywhere else? Not that we've seen. It's a very large white mushroom. I don't have photos of it. I've never seen it. I stop there every single time I go through, and it's never in fruit when I go by. So this is kind of how mushrooms grow. Now with our very specific forest collisions, that's why we see these odd numbers, these odd pairings of trees, and we see mushrooms that just don't exist anywhere else. These trees aren't supposed to grow next to each other. One is supposed to be in Canada, one's supposed to be in the southern US, but they have to collide somewhere. And with the really unique collision of those 3 forests coming together near Cable, Wisconsin, we get some absolutely wild varieties of mushrooms. Cystoderma granosum. I just included this one because I think it's really pretty. There's several species of cystoderma that grow around here: Phalax, Amianthinum, Rugoso reticulatum, I'm sorry. But this one, I don't know of it to grow anywhere else. It's not uncommon It's pretty widespread in northern Wisconsin, but I don't think I've seen it anywhere else in the United States. And I've picked mushrooms in 40 states, excluding the northeast part of the United States, where I'd say the likelihood is greater. I just haven't been up there yet. But a very pretty mushroom, if nothing else. Lactarius thionos. This is called Lactarius because it actually exudes a milk. There's many species in the genus Lactarius and Lactifluus that if you cut them, they weep. And we can just see one little droplet right here. The milk from this mushroom is bright orange. And this mushroom grows exclusively with balsam fir, so I included a little balsam fir sprig in this photo back here. A great edible mushroom, very, very fragrant, smells very pleasant, almost like lilacs. And it has a nice sweet taste like that as well. There's other relatives to this mushroom that grow nationwide, even worldwide, that when you cut them, they bleed orange, but then that orange oxidizes to green. This one does not. This one stays orange, which makes it unique to our area, to wherever the balsam fir grows. Hemistropharia albocrenulata is a really cool mushroom that when Dr. Bunyard is up here, he gets excited because to him, this is a rare mushroom. I see this mushroom every day. It's very common here. It likes birches, particularly white birches. So when he comes up here, he gets all excited when we find one. I'm like, get out in the woods, dude. We can find hundreds of these. And we have. You know, when he was talking about it the first time, he said, this is a very rare mushroom. I said, no, it isn't. It's rare to you. He lives down in the Chicago area, just outside of Chicago. He doesn't see it very often. He grew up in Ohio and then moved to Milwaukee and then down to Chicago. And that's where he did most of his mushroom hunting. So for him to find this, yeah, that would be exceedingly rare. Up here, no, this beautiful mushroom exists in great quantity. We've also got some great edible mushrooms up here. Not necessarily unique, with one exception here, but we've got the porcini, also called the penny bun or the sep or the steinpilz or the king bolete. We've got 5 species of that here in Wisconsin, 5 species of porcini. It used to be thought that there was 9, but with some recent genetic studies, we found that they're actually, a lot of them are just the same mushroom. They just look different because of the trees that they grow with. So our porcini here, this is Boletus variopes. This is a fabulous, delicious mushroom. And we do see this one in pretty good quantity in the early autumn, August and September. I know that's technically still summer, but let's be honest, that's autumn. September is autumn. You can find this at grocery stores all over. They sell it under the name dried porcini. Excellent mushrooms, or you can just get out in the woods and find them on your own. Tricholoma magnivillari. This mushroom is exclusive to 2 small areas in Wisconsin. One is from Superior to Ashland, and the other is from Green Bay to North Milwaukee. They need sandy soil, very poor soil. They require that and a relationship with a 2-needled pine tree. We have 2 pine trees in Wisconsin that have 2 needles per bundle, and that is the red pine and the jack pine. So you have to have poor sandy soil and one of those 2 trees to find this mushroom. This mushroom is, without any doubt, my favorite of the mushrooms. It's got a very strong taste of cinnamon and cedar. It does not taste much like a mushroom at all. Japanese restaurants treasure this mushroom and they'll pay very good money for it. I've heard of, if you get them younger than these specimens are, them paying up to $100 per mushroom. My friend Brooke picked some a few years ago in northern Wisconsin, and he found a Japanese restaurant in Chicago that gave him $50 a piece for this mushroom. They weren't in that great a shape. I don't find a ton of them. I didn't find any last year, I don't think. I don't remember finding any. The year before, I found 19. That was the best year I ever had. And I came home and I ate every single one of them. They were fantastic. But I taught my friend who lives up in Washburn, I taught her how to hunt them and where to find them. And she picked nearly 300 of them 2 years ago. And what's funny, she says, I don't like them that much. They're too strong for me. So she gave me a bunch of them, which was nice because I didn't have quite the year that she did. So I still have never sold one. I can't bear to watch them go away. They're just too tasty. And one that does grow statewide and throughout the central and eastern United States is the Craterellus phalanx, the black trumpet. But it grows in massive quantities up here. A lot of times I will just sit down with a scissors and just trim these fragile little mushrooms off. These are very earthy, spicy, fragrant mushroom. They're almost too strong tasting to eat on their own. They go well with other things. I like to dry them and make them into a salt and just sprinkle them on. But I took and filleted one open and they kind of unfold. They're kind of the texture of cardboard. I did not when you're eating them, but when you're handling them. And I laid it out on a venison cutlet. They're so strong tasting that after I cooked them together, I couldn't taste venison anymore. All I could taste was this mushroom. Extremely fragrant, very useful in small quantity. We've also got some extraordinary mushrooms out there. This is a purple coral that I found very near my parents' house a few years back. This mushroom, the further north you go, the more common it is. Madeline Island has these by the millions. If you walk through Big Bay State Park up there, if you ever get up there, look down a little bit. You'll see these. Quite common. I don't see them around here as often, but there's a couple places where I can find them reliably. No, it's a purple coral looking thing. Clavaria zolingeri is the species. So get out there. What will you find? This is a new species to science. I discovered this one in 2018 or 19. I don't remember which. On Madeline Island, this is Pheocolybia madelinensis. I named it after the island. It has not been found since. So the name is provisional, but DNA sequencing said that it was definitely unique. And only the top, well, from about my hand, my finger here upward was exposed. The rest was a long taproot. And this mushroom is as hard as wood. I could club somebody to death with it if I had to. So get out there. I found two species that are unknown to science. I've got a rack behind me of the genus Russula. That's my area of study. And I've got 27 species here that I'm really questioning have ever been documented before. It's exciting. So we're going to move on to now my other program. And that is on cultivation. So when I find these mushrooms in the wild, I cultivate them. So there's a few ways we can do this. These pictures aren't going to be the greatest. I mean, this one's nice. I took this one with a nice camera, but I took a bunch of phone pictures yesterday to put this presentation together. So some of them aren't the greatest, and I apologize for that. I usually like to have the best pictures I can to keep people interested. But what is a mushroom? Mushroom is the fruiting body of a fungus. A fungus is a network of fibers called mycelium. It kind of resembles cotton candy or fiberglass insulation. Those fibers secrete enzymes breaking down organic material and drawing that nutrition and water back to a reproductive structure. This is not a wonderful picture, but we get the idea. This is a mushroom over here, and all these fibers that we see here are mycelium. Now, any cubic inch of soil, rotting wood, compost, leaf litter, anything out in the world has approximately 8 miles of mycelium running through it. That's how tiny those fibers can be. So all we really have to do is transfer one piece of that, and we have all the genetic information that we need to grow mushrooms. So we can do it a few different ways. We can take the spores from the mushroom. That's easily done. They can be collected on a piece of aluminum foil. That's typically how I do it. You just leave the cap on there and let the spores fall out. We can clone the mushroom. We'll talk about all these two in a little bit. Or we can take some of that mycelium and add it to an enriched water, usually with honey or corn syrup or brewer's malt extract to give it a little bit of nutrition. And we keep the organism alive. These are mushroom spores magnified 1,000 times. Each mushroom will produce upwards of a couple billion spores, even more for the larger mushrooms, like the large puffballs that we see in the late summer and early fall. They can produce up to 7 trillion spores, which is an astronomical number. I don't know who had the time to count them all, but not me. So we can take a couple of these spores, add some water and a little bit of nutrition, and get them to elongate. Now, unlike plants where one seed equals one plant, in the mushroom world, that's not the case. One spore equals one mycelial thread, and that thread actually has to bond to the thread of another spore or many spores. And mushrooms don't have two reproductive sexes like plants and animals do. They have many, many more, usually between 9 and 16. But our local mushroom schizophilum community has 28,000 known sexes, each compatible with about 23,000 of the others. It makes dating in the mushroom world very easy. Another thing we can do is take the mushroom and cut into the inner tissues here. And I usually go for the stem. Some guys go for the cap, but I like going for the stem. I cut it open or I tear it open, and I take just a little tiny piece, about half the size of a grain of rice, out of that. And I take that genetic material, that mushroom material, which has all its genetic code, and I add that to a petri dish with nutrition enriched agar, like jelly. Then the mycelium starts to grow. Or I can do that into liquid culture. So what we're seeing in here is strands of mushroom DNA, basically. It's mushroom mycelium floating around in this liquid. These are the pictures I was apologizing for. They're not the greatest. So what I did here is I took, and this white box that you see in the back right here is a laminar flow hood that blows a sterile breeze on me so that no contaminants fall into what I'm doing. So what I did here is I took a hypodermic needle, like a number 14 or a number 16, and I put it into the mushroom and twisted it. So I had a little tiny slug inside that needle. And then I fired it into this liquid, and 10 days later, it had grown into something usable. Then I just take a syringe, draw some of that liquid out, and I can go to the next step from there. So after we've done that, that's how we're getting the culture started. The next step from that is what's called spawn. Spawn is grown on seeds like rye berries or popcorn or oats. And all we're using there is we're using those seeds to hold water. That's a water cell to keep the mycelium alive. It doesn't really generate enough nutrition to fruit mushrooms, but it's a way for me to carry that organism and make it larger. So this is some that's already been fully colonized. These are rye seeds. So I soak them for a day to get them nice and hydrated, actually like 16 hours. And then I add either a little bit of liquid culture or a little cutting from that petri dish we talked about, or even some spores in a water solution shot in there so that they can start to grow. Spores being the slowest way, liquid culture being the fastest way. It's a little more complicated. So I don't do a ton of liquid culture here, but I do some. Mostly what I do is petri dishes with jelly. The next step after that is substrate. Substrate is where our mushroom is getting its nutrition. So in the wild, that's typically decaying wood or other decaying organic material, grasses, dead animals, dead plants, anything that's dead. So these mushrooms are our saprobic mushrooms. So the substrates that we create here, we can use anything like sawdust or wood chips or compost or straw or manure. We just have to make sure that we pasteurize it so that we kill all the competition off. I use hardwood fuel pellets. A lot of people heat their houses with them. There's not a ton of nutrition in there, so I supplement it with wheat bran. Sometimes I use brown rice flour. Sometimes I use millet seed or millet flour. But anything just to bump the nutrition up a little bit. So I go at a rate of about, anywhere from 10 to 20% wheat bran. I use wheat bran because it's the cheapest of the nutritions. Brown rice flour gets ridiculously expensive. You don't need very much of it, though. Brown rice flour is extremely nutritious. So it's kind of a horse apiece there, but it's not as easy to handle. It turns into concrete after you cook it, and it's really hard to mix. Wheat bran mixes very freely, very easily. So when I add a little bit of spawn, so I take anywhere from a tablespoon to a full cup of the seeds that are encased in that mycelium, and I add it to this and then seal the bag. This bag has a little filter patch on here so that the organism can breathe. and I let it colonize. Once this block is completely white, we go to the final stage, which is fruiting. So fruiting is when mycelium finds oxygen and starts to grow mushrooms. You have to have enough nutrition there that it has the energy to produce mushrooms. But as soon as I cut that bag open, the mushrooms pop out like this. This is a black pearl oyster that we're growing. I've got some available right now. Ooh, maybe I don't. I might have my last one spoken for. I'm not sure. I've got another batch coming up. It'll be ready in 22 days, 23 days. I won't be able to get to it till Friday. So when I'm out in the wild and I find a cool new mushroom that matches what I need as far as its lifestyle, its saprobic lifestyle, I'll take that mushroom into my laboratory here, and I'll either mate its spores with another cutting from another species, or not another species, another specimen of that species, or I will take spores from both and actually draw two lines in a petri dish, and where those two lines collide, I reach in with a scalpel and very delicately take out where I can visibly see that both lines have connected to each other, and now I have a new strain of mushrooms. Then, if it's successful, like this one here clearly is, this is huge. This is way bigger than my head. Because that's a 10-pound block. I usually make 5-pound blocks. So that thing is that whole cluster is probably 12 to 14 inches tall. Every part of it's edible. So this was a very successful strain. It doesn't always work that way. When I got into this portion of it, I've been cultivating mushrooms since the late 1980s, early 1990s, but I was doing it the easy way. And now I'm having a lot more fun with it, playing, and I've got the equipment to do it and the knowledge. I've been doing this for about, maybe like 13 or 14 years. But when I started, they said that your odds are 1 in 1,000 of getting a productive strain. My shiitake strain that I got here, that was my first attempt. Maybe I got lucky, whatever. With the oysters, we've developed 2 of our own strains here. Me and my employee, Eric, he's getting pretty good at it too. We have a yellow oyster with gray spots on it, which is kind of cool. So he named that one the leopard oyster, whatever. Yeah. And then we've got an unnamed gray oyster where I crossed a gray oyster with a blue oyster. And I ended up with, they're not very big. They're really stemmy, but they're really, really flavorful. It's an excellent mushroom. So we've got those genetic pairings here. So I keep that organism alive essentially forever. So every time I make a jar of spawn, I take 1 little tablespoon out and I add it to another spawn bag to keep it alive and keep it going. And then I use the rest of it to make these fruiting blocks. So it's very important. Each time I start a batch of grow kits, I save a little bit of those genetics. Otherwise, I sell them all and it goes out the door. And now I've missed out on future generations of that particular mushroom. So it's easy to forget, it's easy to overlook, and it's easy to screw up. But
Tavis, it sort of sounds like a sourdough starter. Keep a little bit to keep it going. Is that 100%. A good analogy?
Yep, that is perfect. Or the old
That's what I was thinking.
Friendship muffins, where you had that fermented culture to start your muffins, and then you passed on, like a little cup of it to get somebody else to start theirs. Absolutely, I like that. Sourdough starter or kombucha or anything that we're making where we're dealing with a living organism. So that's all I have for you, everybody. Any questions?
So how do you know if the mushrooms in your backyard are edible or poisonous?
Well, I'm going to stop sharing here. There's not really any good rule for that, rule of thumb. So there are, some of the older field guides had what's called the 3 rules. Number 1, never eat little brown mushrooms. I don't like that rule. I say learn which little brown mushrooms to avoid. I think that's a better way to look at it. Rule number 2 was do not experiment with the genus Amanita. How about don't experiment? Very straightforward. And the number 3 was avoid false morels. Boy, we've learned a lot about false morels in the last few years, most of them being perfectly edible and very good. But you got to know which ones you're eating. So really the only rule is don't eat anything that you haven't identified with 100% certainty. I think that's probably, that's common sense. Don't Don't experiment. Don't put it in your mouth if you don't know what it is. There's not any real good rules in the field to say that's a poisonous mushroom. They don't give us warnings like plants and animals do. You know, the poison dart frog is wildly colored. A skunk has those bold stripes. You know, they tell us to stay away. That's not the case in the mushroom world. And we do have two species, actually one species and one species group here in Wisconsin and Minnesota that are potentially lethal. So 2 out of 1,000. I mean, your odds are good, but they're both common mushrooms. Definitely so. There's only one way to know if a mushroom is poisonous, and I'm not going to do it. Yeah, I'm not interested.
Tavis, do you have any suggestions for going out and mushroom hunting?
Do it every day. Quit your job and go mushroom hunting every day. That's what I did. It's been wonderful. I quit work in 2018. Now I'm still working, but it's not work to me. It's fun. I'm having a party every day, looking for mushrooms, trying to grow mushrooms here. There are some good field guides out there, and there's some really terrible ones. I've got a couple here. The one I would recommend, well, obviously I got to recommend The Beginner's Guide to Mushrooms. I wrote that one, so it's the greatest book ever. But I like this one a lot. This is the first one I grab when I've got a question. It's called The Mushrooms of Northeastern United States and Eastern Canada by Timothy Baroni. And this one is very easy to read for the beginners. It's got a lot of mushrooms in it, 700-800 species, and it's organized by color and shape and spore color. The other one, The Mushrooms of the Midwest, I like it, but I'm not a beginner. The mushrooms in there are organized alphabetically. I think that's a terrible idea. It's not useful unless you have an idea. Well, I think it's a cystoderma. Then you can go to the cystoderma chapter. If you don't know what it is, you're stuck with his terrible dichotomous keys in the front of the book, and they're not that handy. Another great beginner's book is, let's see here. I've got it here somewhere, right here. I've got like 200 mushroom books to my left. So this one is called The Complete Mushroom Hunter. And this one is a fiberboard paperback, whatever, a Flexibound book by Quarto Publishing, written by the great Gary Linkoff. He passed away about 5 years ago. He was the godfather of mycology. This book is fabulous for the beginner. I highly recommend it. It tells you how to identify a bunch of mushrooms, what to wear to be comfortable, bring water, what kind of a basket you should be using, just for the protection of the mushrooms, not to be in style or anything like that. And all the way down to how to cook them once you find them. So I like that one a lot. Same publisher. Oops, that's the wrong book. There it is. This is my second book, The Beginner's Guide to Mushrooms. Also available from Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Goodreads, whatever. I got better photos. I will say that. I didn't take them. My partner Britt, he was my co-author on this book. He did all the photos. I did all the writing. It's pretty good, but the problem with this book is, and I wrote it and I'm trying to sell it obviously, but it's not specific to any region. It is for the Northern Hemisphere. So I had a friend that was traveling to the Czech Republic, and she picked up a bunch of European field guides for me to help me write the European portions of that book. Just because I've never been to Europe. I don't know what they have there for mushrooms other than what I see on Facebook a little bit, and a little bit of my dad's old mushroom books had some discussion of European species, but it certainly wasn't a modern approach. So I had a lot of work to do to get that figured out. Then there's, right from Minnesota, we've got this little guy, Mushrooms of the Upper Midwest. It's got a brown cover now. It's been rewritten. I actually do like this book. I didn't think I would at first. It's pretty good, and it's written by Kathy Yarrick out of Forest Lake, Minnesota, and Teresa Maroney. And I don't know where Teresa's from, but I think it's the Twin Cities. I think she's written like 40 books, and she's pretty knowledgeable. It's definitely a beginner's field guide, and it's cheap, $16. Yeah, I got the first edition, and there's a couple errors in here, but they have since improved it. in the second edition. In the second edition now, rather than a blue cover, it has a brown cover. It fits in your pocket. It's easy to read. It's got a little bit of edibility stuff. It's not real specific. It kind of gets you to, like this page here is called Tiny Fragile Mushrooms, various species, or I'm sorry, numerous. Yeah, various species, numerous. And it's got some species names on here, but it just kind of lumps them together. So if you're really getting into every species that's out there, this isn't the one. But it's a great beginner's field guide, and it'll help you identify most of what you find in the woods around here. And that's specific to the upper Midwest, the mushrooms of the upper Midwest, which was going to be the title of my third book, but they beat me to it. So I got to come up with something else now.
Hey, Tavis, this is John. I have a cabin up on the Canadian border north of Grand Marais, Minnesota, but kind of up near the Boundary Waters. And I've taken a bunch of pictures of mushrooms on the property. You want to see a few and help me identify some?
Absolutely. You can even email them to me or send them to me on Facebook. I'll identify every one. But yeah, let's try it here. Let's see what happens.
Let's see.
I go up to Schroeder, Minnesota, and hunt mushrooms up there every autumn.
Yeah, I'm past Schroeder.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're up north of Grand Marais, you're quite a ways past Schroeder. Oh, screen share. Sure, that's a good idea.
Yep, here we go. Okay, here's number one. Can you see that?
I can, and I'm gonna actually need to see more of that one, but it does look like it's, yeah, that might be Boletus in the edulous clade, but I'd have to see more of that mushroom to be certain.
Here's a super cool one.
Yeah, so this is Lacaria lacata. Sometimes they call it the lac, and that's actually a really good edible brown mushroom, but I don't teach that one to people just due to risk of misidentification. But Lacaria lacata, Laccaria laccata.
Okay. I want to try to find one that you haven't seen. You've probably seen them all.
Most likely. This is Hygrospy chlorophana.
Okay. Edible?
That's in the category we would say probably edible.
Probably.
Yeah.
What's this little guy?
That looks like the same mushroom.
Maybe so.
This is Ramaria. There's several species of Ramaria in this gold color. There's some bright orange ones. There's some bright pink ones. So this is probably Ramaria aurea, Aurea.
Okay.
And I only say probably because I'd have to see the base to see if the base is white or not.
Sure. I don't know if I have enough of a.
Yeah, and the Ramarias that are edible are very. Yeah, I'd have to actually see it pulled.
Sure.
Yeah, but the Ramarias that are edible are actually very good. The ones that are not will send you to the bathroom really, really fast.
For sure.
What do we got here? This is a Clitosobe, and I'm not sure which species. Clitosobe is a very, very tough genus. It could be, yeah, looking at it there, it's definitely Clitosobe. I don't know which species that would be.
Dude, you are a master. This is fun.
This is, I'd have to see the underside, but this looks like it's probably also a Clitosobe. Maybe Clitosobe subconnexa or Clitosobe robusta.
All right.
This is Leptonia. Leptonia seriolata, most likely, with that dark color.
I was hoping I had something really unique up here.
This is Entoloma abertivum, which is actually two mushrooms together. They call this shrimp of the woods. It's edible. A lot of people really like it. I really don't. I've heard it also called lamb's ears, but what this is a honey mushroom that's been attacked by the Entoloma mushroom, which encased it in mycelium, rendering it sterile so that it kills its competition. So you're eating the genetic material of two different species when you eat this one. And that's all they are, is a clump. This is another Hygrospy or Glioxanthomyces. Some of the yellow ones got moved into the genus Glioxanthomyces a couple years ago. But Hygrophorus or Hygrospy is close enough for most. So it's one of the yellow ones. This is Clavulina cristata. This is another coral. And it's unusual to see it perfectly white like this. very susceptible to a gray mold, and most of them get hit with that mold. So
Hmm.
it's cool to see it in its fully white form. We don't see it as often. You know, I see it every year, but most of the time that we see it, it's kind of a gunmetal gray from that hypomyces infection that it gets.
All right. Well, I have about 100 more, but I'll stop there. But thank you. That was fun.
Yeah, you can email them to me anytime. My email is mushroomtavis@gmail,
Thank you.
and I get hundreds of them a day in the fall. But you're not bothering me. People are like, "Oh, I'm sorry to bother you." It's not a bother. I like doing it. It helps me keep me sharp too.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Well,
Can I show you a little bit of what I bought from Tavis and how I got to grow my mushrooms at home? And
That'd
then
be awesome.
if there's anything else you want to share. Okay, so let me figure out how to share this. Let's see. Photos. Tell me if you can see my photos.
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. So you get them in bags like this, and then he gives you these 4 sticks and plastic. So you cut the plastic off the top. You know, he was showing you the bag that had the like breather thing on it. So this is gray, and I don't know what I have on the right here. Was that black oyster?
Most likely.
And
Yeah.
then
Yep. Black pearl.
black pearl. And then I started, you
Yes.
know, as they were growing, I'd measure them. This is in Tavis's shop where he has them getting ready to sell. I don't know if any of these were ready, but anything you wanted to say about?
Uh, yeah, that's an old picture.
It
Doesn't
is.
look like that down here anymore.
I know. This is when you kind of got to that new site, I think, during the pandemic.
This was pandemic era for sure, or shortly
Yeah.
thereafter.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Now it's all a sterile laboratory down here now in my office.
yeah. Okay. So here are the gray oysters growing. And then in the room, when I took a picture and the sun was coming in, it was like, you know, it must put spores or something in the air, because that is a room that looked like a normal room, but the photo makes it look like it was full of fog. But
So
here they
on that note, those mushroom spores, if you're breathing them regularly and in quantity, they can be not good for you. So I didn't know that when I started farming. So that's, you've got some spores in the air, sure, you breathe them in, it's fine. But I was doing it every day for a decade, and I ended up with such horrible lung infections, and we couldn't figure out where I was getting them from. And the only thing that helped me was prednisone. And after 7 cycles of prednisone over the course of 19 months, it destroyed both of my femoral heads. I had to have 2 complete hip replacements, all because of excessive breathing of mushroom spores. I've got 2 artificial hips because of mushrooms. I had them replaced 6 years ago. Now I wear a respirator when I go out in the grow house. I'm
Wow.
super sensitive to it now.
Okay, I'm just going to keep going because he accused me of
Sure.
singing sweet Italian love songs to my mushrooms because they got so big. And then I waited a little too
That's the
long to
trick.
harvest them. See how they're kind of, they go up rather than flat. I think, Tavis, didn't you say I maybe waited just a little long to harvest them?
A little bit. Yeah, they're starting to lose water as they discharge spores. So I like to pick them when they're a lot smaller. Yep, those are old mushrooms. They're still edible. They're fine. I'm sure they were great.
You're awesome. I'll show you in a second, but that's how big it is. If you see them next to the squirt can, that's how huge. So these came to almost 14 ounces.
That's awesome.
And then what I did was I peeled them like string cheese, and I put them in a really hot pan and made them crunchy. And then I just put them on a salad. And this is all backyard produce and eggs that I had for a lunch. So anyway,
Very
I just
cool.
wanted to show you a few. And the shiitakes were really cool looking. These were some black pearls, but let me get to the shiitake. There's the shiitakes growing. They look like a comic book, and they were 14. So anyway, I think that's all that I have. But
You
if
grew shiitakes from me too? I don't remember that.
yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Anyway,
So that shiitake strain is our strain that we developed here.
let's see
Those
if
are
I
exclusive to me. That strain is called Your Highness. That was
Wow.
somebody
Cool.
nicknamed that. They said they looked like little crowns, and she said
Cool.
you should call them Your Highness. So that it's stuck.
May 2022 is when I grew those.
Okay. Okay. Yep. I am making some tonight. I think that's on my list. I've got shiitake spawn ready to go. I just don't have a lot of demand for the shiitake kits because the first couple batches weren't extremely successful. And I think that, I made that public. I'm like, yeah, they don't work that well. So nobody bought them. So I kind of quit making them. But they worked really well outdoors. That was incredible. I've got two farmers down at Stevens Point that won't grow anything else now. They want their spawn from that strain that I've got here. Got lucky, I guess.
Wow.
This is so cool. This is so cool. My goodness, this was a fast hour. I guess it still had 60 minutes, but thank you so much, Tavis.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
Yeah, this is
Absolutely.
great.
Quick question. Can you
Go ahead.
only use the grow kits in Minnesota or Wisconsin? Or like I live in Michigan. Can I also use them in Michigan?
I ship them everywhere
Okay.
except California. California has too many rules.
Oh,
Yeah, figures.
Yeah.
And then I guess real quick, I'm not sure if you know them because they're all the way up in Cable, but they work in Hayward. My cousins are Jody Roth, formerly Rondo, and my cousin Steve Roth. He works for actually he changed outfitters, but used to be with Rasmussen Plumbing. But anyways, great area. So if you happen to know
I know
him,
where Rasmussen Plumbing is. I see those trucks all the time up there right off 63.
well, he might be
but
driving one.
Pardon me?
So he might be driving one.
Oh, certainly.
So.
Yeah, I see him right between Hayward and Springbrook all the time.
Yeah.
Rasmussen Plumbing.
So
I see him every time I
anyways,
go
but
through there,
yeah.
and I go through there a lot. Well, very cool.
So,
yeah, and if anybody's
yeah.
ever in the neighborhood, I like going out in the woods looking for mushrooms. Just drop me a line. We'll take a walk. I'm happy to do it. I do it all
that'd be
summer
so
long.
cool. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. I don't charge for
Oh,
that.
I
I'm
spend
gonna do it
like
anyway. Might as well have.
oh, that'd be
so much of the
great.
summer up there. Oh, that'd be so cool. Okay, summer adventure. I
Yeah.
love it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I have an
Tavis,
And I get up.
this was great, Tavis. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.